All right, so today I have on licensed therapist, best-selling author, CEO, and conference founder Danielle Massi. How are you doing today, Danielle?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to have you on. I've
I
been
know,
like
me too.
wanting to have you on for a while now, and hear all about your story because I was like, I know so many people are gonna resonate and like find it so interesting and like motivational and everything. So tell us a little bit then about your start, kind of your path to shadow work.
So for me, shadow work was something that was always there, like in the corner lurking, and I just didn't pay attention to it. I got my degree in psychology and cognitive neuroscience, and I learned about shadow work in both. And then I went on to teach at Penn State while opening a private practice. And at Penn State, I taught shadow work. Like there was a day that I literally just went deep into Freud and Jung, and I taught about them for multiple semesters, multiple courses over and over and over again, but I wasn't doing shadow work. It wasn't until I was diagnosed with cancer and I kind of spiraled out with that diagnosis. I got really depressed. I was a bit of a wreck. It came out of nowhere, so I didn't know what to do. My doctors didn't really have a lot of resources for me. They didn't know how to help me, and they didn't really take the time to figure it out either. I'm sure I'm not the first oncology patient that was like, "Hey, what resources do you have?" But all they had for me was, "We have a wall of pamphlets." That was the response. So I took it into my own hands and I started thinking about all the tools that I knew as a licensed therapist, and I'd done them all. I'd gone through them all. They never really felt that impactful. So I started thinking about alternative ones, and shadow work kind of popped into my mind. And shadow work is the process of going into the unconscious. So it's really deep. And I found this woman in the UK named Allison, who is a shadow worker and also a licensed therapist, just like me. And she took me into my shadows for about a year, almost 2 years of doing it every single week. And my life changed in an instant.
Oh my goodness. So when you were diagnosed with cancer, can you tell us like how old were you and everything, and like did you know?
I had no idea. And it was the week of my 30th birthday. So I went in for my 6 month appointment, like I always do. And actually, back then it was annual appointment. So I went in for my annual appointment. Now I'm stuck going every 6 months, which is fun. But when I was there, we're just chit chatting. Nothing looked wrong. She does a pap smear, like the usual stuff that you would get done. And we do the see you later. And I get a call a couple days later, and she's like, "Hey, like something came back weird. Just come in. It's nothing. I know it's nothing because you have no signs or symptoms." And I was like, "Okay." So I go in. They took a bunch of biopsies, which was the craziest pain I'd ever felt up until that point. And I had no idea what was coming because that was the least painful thing I had to do with all my cancer stuff. And they took a bunch of biopsies. And she said, "I don't see anything. Like nothing's coming back. You're fine. So don't worry about it. This is just precautionary." And a couple days later, that week of my 30th birthday, I got the phone call. "It's cancer. You got to come back like now. And we got to start coming up with an aggressive plan to get it out."
So I can only imagine how, you were feeling, and this didn't happen to like anybody in your family or anything.
No, my grandmother was a breast cancer survivor 2 times over, and then she eventually died from it. But breast cancer and cervical cancer aren't necessarily related. It's like a different part of the body. So I was shocked, and so was everybody else. And the thing with cervical cancer is it typically grows very slowly. It's one of the slowest moving cancers to progress. So with cervical cancer, usually there's years of abnormal pap smears. There's years of warning signs. You have time to do preventative stuff. Like there's something called a DNC where they essentially do like a very gentle scrape of all the cells inside of the wall of the cervix all the way up through. And when they do that, they're taking away like the top layer. It's sort of like getting a facial where they're like taking off the top layer of skin. And when they do that, they're just getting rid of anything abnormal so it doesn't have the chance to grow. Mine just never did that. I was there in July for my son's birth. And within a few weeks after his birth in August, I got an IUD put in, and I was still normal then. And between August and December, it went from not only being just abnormal, there's some weird signs and symptoms or precancer, it went to full blown cancer, which is unheard of.
Oh my God,
Mhm.
that is crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah, like oh my gosh, like 6 months or 4 months,
Not
whatever.
even. Yeah, it was so fast.
Oh my
Hmm.
God. And I can like, how were you feeling? Because you just had your son, so, and you already have another child. So what were you like? What was going through your head?
Yeah, it was crazy. I was so depressed. And the worst part about it is everybody on my care team telling me all the time that I was like a unicorn. Like, this doesn't happen. This is not normal. And I think that's probably why they were so aggressive with my treatment, because it shouldn't have accelerated that fast. So for me, all I could think about in between like the crying and the screaming and the feeling very woe is me is how. Like, how did this happen? Because nothing happens out of nowhere. There's always a reason. And etiology, the cause behind something, is one of my favorite things to study in like my sciencey life. So I wanted to understand. And I started diving into research. And what I found in all the research that I could find is that the number one cause of all illnesses, whether they be cancer, autoimmune, mental illness, is stress. And I was really stressed. And leading up to that point, for about 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, even, I was a ball of stress. And I just didn't give myself the time to process that stress or to understand how to help myself through it. I just always told myself that I could keep moving forward and eventually it would just stop, or I'd keep using that stress to do new things. And there were signs and symptoms there. I saw so many stress signs. Like, I was diagnosed in my early 20s with shingles, which is something that people only get when they're in their like 50s and 60s
Yeah.
and 70s, unless you have such an exorbitant amount of stress in your body that the body just can't take it. So that was a pretty big sign. I also had postpartum with both of my kids. I had so many issues leading up to that point, and I just blew them all off. I
Hmm.
kept moving, which I think as women, we're all kind of trained to do. You have to produce, you have to do things for other people, you have to put everybody else first. And if you're feeling bad about it, hide those feelings. You got to keep moving.
I totally like that part of your story like resonate with totally because like my mom, she was always so stressed, I felt like, and then she didn't deal with it in a healthy way, but also like, it wasn't like the stuff that we know now about health and wellness. It wasn't as
Yeah,
known. And I swear, like, I think that's how she developed her like autoimmune disease. And then
I don't doubt it for a second.
and then like she had high blood pressure and yeah, so like I think that's one of the reasons why she eventually, passed at 57 because like of all the health problems she developed and she was a nurse. So yeah, that's that's
Yeah, healthcare providers have so much stress from their job, let alone what they do at home. Like, being a therapist and a professor, I was waking up at like 5 a.m., throwing some makeup on my face. Some days I'd try and work out, but that was an epic fail most of the time. Grab my kids, get them to daycare by 7:30. I'm on campus for 8:30 to teach, teaching back-to-back courses. Small break in the car to drive to my office where I'd like down a granola bar really quick, teach again where I'm with my clients, maybe like 8 clients in a row, back to back to back to back to back. And then at 9:30, I'm done. I didn't eat dinner yet. So grab another granola bar and maybe a yogurt in the Uber on the way home. So I get home at 10 o'clock. And then maybe if I had time to shower, I would. And I'd do it again the next day. That's insanity. Like, hearing it now and thinking about the way that my life works now, it's insanity. I'm surprised I didn't get sick sooner,
hmm
but it was normal.
right. And what do you feel like? Do you feel like there was anything? Because I know now we hear like, oh, like delegate, delegate. Do you feel like there was anything that like kept you from like maybe delegating some tasks or anything?
I think at that point, there wasn't much for me to delegate because as a professor, can't give away my courses. And as a therapist, can't give away my clients. So there wasn't much I could do. I think for me, the biggest shift was saying, I don't want to do those things anymore because it just wasn't serving me the way that I needed to be. So I don't teach in the traditional sense anymore. I have courses that I run and I bring all of my professor skills to that, but I don't have a course that I'm teaching. And at Penn State, it was lovely. I met amazing people. It was great to have that on my resume, but I was severely underpaid. Like, it was awful how little that they paid us, but that was what they could afford. That was the budget, or at least that's the way that they framed it for us.
Mhm.
And then with my clients, with therapy clients, I was a private pay therapist. So I was already making more than your average therapist. But I didn't want to charge too much because that's unfair to the people who are coming through. They need help. They need support. You can't price it so high that they can't get that support. So trying to find that level of how do I price this in a way where it feels like I'm not going to burn out? I never hit that stride because the things that you're carrying as a therapist are so incredibly heavy. We're talking about people's lowest moments, their heartbreaks. Sometimes I deal with people with really horrible personality disorders and they were abusive to me. So that was all too much. And those pieces of the job I don't miss. And
Mhm.
with shadow work and having this position as being a shadow worker, I can set all the boundaries and I can delegate like crazy. And I have a work life balance that makes sense. And I know right before we hopped on recording, I was telling you about all the stuff that I have to do today and how my days back to back to back to back to back. That's just poor planning today. This was actually supposed to be my day off, but most days I don't start work until like 10 or like 10:30, sometimes 11. And I'll take a long bubble bath in the morning and I'll take it really slow and it's nice and easy because that's the way that life is supposed to be. And every day my kids get home at 3:15, I'm there at the door getting them off the bus. And that's the best feeling because before I wasn't even seeing my kids after school. I had, that little window of time that I was getting them dressed and getting them over to daycare to spend with them. And that was it. And weekends
Mhm.
sometimes, because sometimes I go to speaking engagements. I wouldn't even see them then.
Yeah. I love how now you're like, you know how to do the work-life balance now. You know, like what works for you and like what feels good. That's
Right. And we're still
amazing.
human. Like today, I messed up. Today is like the overflow of all the stuff that I've been messing up on. But we have human days and that's okay. But as long as it's one day, it's nice to have one day that's crazy and like 80 until the next time that
Mhm.
happens to me.
Yeah, and I feel like I really like appreciate you sharing that with me because I feel like still as, a business owner and people like on social media and everything, people are like, "Oh, like grind, grind, do it." But like I still want to be able to do it, but like still have the work-life balance. And I'm like, okay, it might take maybe a longer time or what, but I'm like I already know what burnout's like and I don't want to get there.
Absolutely not. And you saw your mom. So you have a
Mhm.
really unique window into it that maybe other people don't have.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So then with the shadow work, so you said it is the unconscious, because I was like, before I started, well, read your book, which I love, have it right here. Before I started, because I'm like, I've heard of shadow before. I've heard it from you, but I've also heard it from like different like meditation programs
TikTok,
and stuff.
meditations. Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah. And
everywhere.
I'm
It's
like,
floating in the
what
back.
is it? I'm like, what is it? So is it like limiting beliefs? Like, but so it's like, so you're saying the unconscious. So is it, so then it's different than the limiting beliefs? Can you
Yeah.
explain like a little bit?
I can
Yeah.
explain everything. I'll go into all the details because this is actually it's become one of my biggest pet peeves is people on the internet talking about shadow work and doing it incorrectly. Because as a professor, and like I'll never get rid of that part of me. I'll always have that professor hat on. It's so important that the definition is true the whole way across so that people understand what they're doing and how it helps. So, shadow work is the process of going into the unconscious mind, which is the deepest level of your psyche. It's the things that are repressed and buried, the things that you have no idea are there. And the way that we do that is through a specific meditative state called theta brainwave state. Theta is the state that you're in as you're drifting off to sleep. When you're like pretty tired, like you could definitely pass out. But if you had to get up and take a phone call, you could. Like you're awake enough to do that. So in theta, when you're in that really kind of sleepy state, essentially what happens is the chokehold that your mind has on unconscious materials loosens because it can't hold on to them when you're that sleepy. And when it's not holding on to the information anymore, it's like the doorway is open. And so it's very easy to remember things that you've forgotten. It's the reason why things tend to come back in our dreams, like memories that you haven't remembered in 10, 15, 20 years will come out in a dream, or like pieces of them will come out, or you'll have those like daydreams during the day if you're drifting off, and things will come back and you'll be like, where did that come from? Like, I don't know why I just thought of that. That's so random. It's because of this reason. Now, shadow is something that Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist, came up with. It's his term. He's the one who came up with the name. And what he was talking about was unconscious. So, a lot of the time on social media or in meditations, people will say it's the subconscious mind, which is actually not true. We have three layers to our consciousness. The conscious mind is the stuff that you are fully 100% aware of. It's you knowing that you're listening to this podcast right now. It's knowing what you had for breakfast this morning. It's thinking about what you're going to do later when you're like actively planning something through and you're making lists. It's all intentional, it's all conscious. Just below that is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious is all the stuff that you're like not actually that aware of, but you can recall it if you need to. So, for instance, if you've ever driven somewhere and you get there and you're like, I don't even remember driving here, like your brain kind of shifted into autopilot, that's subconscious behavior. You're literally moving without your brain being actively running. But if you had to remember it, you probably could. Like if you really sat down and you close your eyes and you go, where did I just go? You can see it in your head. It's there. It's close enough. It's also things like blinking, which you're not doing on purpose. That's a subconscious behavior. It's automatically happening. So it's a lot of your automatic thoughts and behaviors. When you go see a therapist, this is the stuff you're dealing with. This is what I dealt with for the 10 to 15 years of my career that I was working as a therapist. We're dealing with the stuff you can recall if you want to, but you don't really want to because it's not always fun. So thinking about things like what you've done in your relationships that are shitty, or pieces of your childhood that you can remember if you want to, but you've kind of pushed them down for a long time, but they're there. You can get to them. Unconscious stuff, though, if I asked you what the worst moment was that happened to you when you were 6, you won't remember. It's not something you can pull on consciously or even subconsciously. But when we're in theta brainwave state and I ask you the same question, whoosh, comes right back like it was always there. And it's shocking sometimes to see what lies within that unconscious mind. It's like a junk closet for your brain. And the brain is interesting because every single thing that you've ever experienced, whether it's like scratching your head Tuesday, July 18th, 2019, it's all in your head. You still remember it. But the vast majority of that stuff, you don't need to remember. So the brain puts it in the unconscious. And the heavy things, your traumas, the hard moments, the ones that have shaped your viewpoint on relationships, they're in your unconscious too. And the brain puts those there because if you were to think about your lowest lows every single day, we'd all be depressed. We'd probably be suicidal because it's too heavy to carry all of that stuff all of the time. So the idea with shadow work is we want to go back to those moments one at a time and we want to pull them out. And ideally, we want to aim for the root. We want to go back as far as we can to the first time you felt something. And when we heal that moment by interrupting how it exists in your mind, body, and energy, we're fixing everything that's come afterwards too. So you're immediately releasing triggers, things you've been holding on to for 20 something, 30 something, even 40 something years in 50 minutes.
Oh my goodness. So then, well, thanks for breaking that down because I was like, is the subconscious? I know the subconscious is different than the unconscious. Like,
Everybody does. I get it.
but so they say that the subconscious is that the one that that is like that like 90% of our mind or five like run by that?
Yeah. So here's the way that it works 96% of your actions come from the subconscious because you're acting without thinking. And then all of those actions come from that unconscious root. So the majority of your brain's cognitive space is unconscious. And that's where the 96% comes from. So unconscious memories create subconscious behaviors. Does that make
Mm.
sense? Because it's weird to think about.
Okay. So at the root of like the subconscious is still the unconscious comes down
Yep. The
to.
unconscious is underneath everything. Think
Okay.
about yourself almost like you're a puppet, right? Like the unconscious is what's pulling the strings, and how you move is the subconscious. So, like the things that the puppeteer is making you doing, but the puppeteer is the unconscious mind.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm like, oh, this is all like, coming together. I'm like, yes, I get it now.
And that was really hard to try and explain in a book because I know so many people have heard about shadow work. And they're coming in thinking they know what it is, like it's journaling or like it's subconscious or whatever else. And then you read my book and immediately I start off with like everything you know is wrong. And it's funny because it's an old psychology theory. It's something that dates back into the 1800s, but the practice itself of like going into theta and doing these things is way older than that. Shamanic cultures have been practicing this for thousands of years, but some old white man in the 1800s gave it a name.
Oh, so in the book, I found it so interesting the part because you're saying that the unconscious, a lot of it is things that we don't remember from our childhood, but you mentioned things about past lives.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Past lives are my favorite thing to go into. And most therapists who practice either shadow work or things like hypnotherapy have the same experience of accidentally regressing people back to their past lives unintentionally. Like it's not even something we're setting out to do. And most therapists that I know don't come into this world being spiritual. Like most of us are very into science. We got into this because we want to help people. And most of us didn't want to go to medical school. So that was the halfway point. And when you accidentally regress someone to a past life, it can be really jarring because you didn't plan to go there. And now you're navigating space you've never been to before. There's a few books on this that I love. One that I actually read when I was 16 years old. It's called Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. You know it.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And my chorus teacher actually gave me that book when I was 16. We're still friends to this day. But at 16 years old, she was like, I don't know why, but I feel like I need to give you this. And I was like, okay. We'd never talked about spirituality. We'd never talked about religion. I went to public school. Like she sang with me and then I went home every day. So it was weird, but I read it and it just hit me in a really interesting way where I was like, wow, like I believe that. Like everything in it was like a very valid account. And he was a very esteemed therapist and has done some really great work. But I forgot about it. I read the book. I thought it was great. I left it. And then I went to school for psych and cognitive neuroscience, didn't give it a second thought. It wasn't until I started working with my shadow worker, Allison, that I started thinking about it again. And that was where that first chapter of my book, I immediately started talking about my first session with Allison, where she regressed me into a past life. And for me, regressing people to past lives is easy. It's probably the easiest thing that I do, even easier than childhood sometimes, because we have a lot of emotional entanglements to our own childhoods because we feel things so big when we're little. But past life stuff, it almost feels like an echo. Like if it was like a level 10 when it happened to you in the past, it might feel like a 6 now. Like it's there and it makes everything make sense. Like all these pieces of the puzzle are clicking, but it's not weighing on you so heavily the way maybe hearing your parents fight for the first time when you're 2 might weigh on your soul. But it's fascinating. And for a while, when I first got into this, I was just doing past life regressions for people where I would take them back and see it. But that also, just like therapy, didn't feel like enough for me. Because when I do this work, I want to make sure that it's healing people. That's the whole point. We're not going there just to see where you've been, because that's
Mm.
cool, but it's not healing. I find it so much more healing to go back to those moments and understand what they're doing to you now. How is it that your soul is still carrying this stuff and letting it weigh on you? How is it shaping your worldview? How is it impacting your relationships or giving you fears that you didn't realize that you had? And when we go back and heal those things, it creates this massive ripple effect up. And I think that our souls reincarnate over and over to fix some karmic loops, is what I call them. I talk about that in the book too. Where like there's things your soul has gone through 100 times. And if you fix it at the root, you're fixing all the other times too.
So then to fix it at the root, how do we how are we kind of like yeah, fixing it, I guess. My
Yeah.
question.
So the trick to shadow work, the way that we fix anything, when I say fix it, I mean we're altering how the memory is stored in the mind, body, and energy. The way that we do that is by hacking something called the subconscious feedback loop. Now, the subconscious feedback loop is a loop that has 4 parts. And this is how your memories are stored. And it's also subsequently the way that you manifest. We'll get to that later. But what I know. So, what happens is every second of every day, you are having experiences that are sensory. So, you're hearing things like you're listening to this podcast. Maybe you're sitting down as you listen to it. So, your body is sensing, your nerve endings are feeling the chair that you're sitting on. You're also drinking some water so you can taste something. You're smelling the way that the candle on your desk smells. So all these sensory experiences are happening around you. And what's happening is the brain is taking in that information from every direction. It's using all of its cranial nerves to take that information in. And what happens with that sensory information is it creates a chemical reaction in the brain. We call that an emotion. That emotion is just a chemical cocktail, and its job is to tell the body what to do. So we have the emotion, it sends those chemicals down the spinal cord into the body, and it tells the body what to do. So maybe the last conversation that we had about past lives is triggering for some of you. If that happens, the emotion that you might be feeling is something like anxiety, which is a layered emotion. That's the secondary piece. Underneath it might be fear, or maybe it's sadness or anger. If that happens, the chemicals will tell the body to start producing more chemicals in the physical body, adrenaline and cortisol for anxiety. And so the adrenaline and the cortisol have the job of getting you into fight or flight. So we're going to start having your heart pumping blood really fast. Your breathing's going to get a little bit shallow to help you get more oxygen through to your extremities. Your brain's going to get a little bit foggy because the blood's actually going to move away from the brain and towards the extremities so that you can react, and you rely more on the primal brain or the reptilian brain so that you just jump into action. You know what to do, unless you freeze, of course. And then with all the stuff that's happening internally in your physical body, where you're switching into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, what happens when that's done is a message needs to go back up to the brain through the gut. So your gut will produce more chemicals, and they'll send those chemicals up the spinal cord. This is called your enteric nervous system, back to the brain in the form of a thought. So your thoughts don't come from your head, they come from your gut. So when this thought comes up, it has one job: to reinforce the loop. So if you've had an experience before, let's say you were 2 years old and someone said something and it made you nervous, and this loop that we just talked about kicked into gear, you start feeling anxious. You've got that fear underlying it. You have adrenaline and cortisol pumping through your body. And then the thought that comes up is like, holy shit, like this is terrifying. Now, this moment, all these years later, is recreating the same loop, not because it's actually scary, but because your body and your mind are primed for this loop, because you are literally made to re-experience the same things over and over. And the reason that happens is because of your brain. Your brain, when you're in utero, before you're even born, is like Play-Doh. Like there's nothing there. It's just blank. But the second that the brain really starts to develop around months 3, months 4 in utero, what happens is these things called neural pathways start to develop. And they're like highways in your brain. And as these highways develop, they get strengthened when things are occurring over and over again. So, like, let's say you're sucking your thumb in utero, you'll start to create a really strong neural pathway for soothing yourself. And so that neural pathway becomes solidified. And then after you're born, if you have more experiences where you have to soothe yourself, that neural pathway will have like exits, extra exits coming off of it. Like there's multiple pathways to get to that neural pathway. And it creates this big, vast neuronal network, all based around the initial thumb sucking that was happening in your mom's womb. So that's how it happens, right? These subconscious feedback loops start when you are babies, like you're an infant, you're teeny tiny. And they continue to grow, especially over the first 7 years of your life. Because at that point, there's so much retail space in your head. There's so much room for these neural pathways to grow. And by the time you hit 7, there's a lot of them. You have a lot of neural pathways already. And after age 7, less are forming until by around age 18 to 25, you rarely ever have new ones that are growing. And then by the time you're in your 30s, your brain is basically exactly how it's going to be until you're older, unless you commit yourself to changing. So essentially, what we're doing with shadow work, the scientific piece of it, is we want to find the first neural pathways, the ones that have really shaped the way that you see the world in a negative way. We want to interrupt how they were stored in the brain the first time to create a process called synaptic pruning, where your brain is literally deleting old neural pathways. It's breaking them down. And then what we want to do is we want to put new ones there that actually work for you. And that process is called synaptogenesis. And that happens in the aftermath of shadow work, where you have experiences now that maybe would have scared you before, and now they're not. And so as your body reacts calmly to future incarnations of this, new neural pathways form that are like, no, we're good. We're actually fine. And that's where the magic happens.
Oh man, you said so many things that I'm like, I've never heard of that. I love this. This is amazing. And I think for me, like I feel like I'm at the point where like I know of some of the things. Obviously, I haven't gone into the unconscious too much, but I know of some of these things that I feel like shadow work is gonna be like the next thing for me
Yeah.
because it's like I know and I've tried to reprogram them, but I feel like there's still like a cloud over me with like some of these beliefs or thoughts, and I'm like, ah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? This is what used to piss me off when I was a therapist, is it's like we think we know. Like someone would come into my office, they're like, I have this self-sabotaging behavior. Every job I go into, I ruin it and I end up getting fired. And at the surface, that's a good start. We start talking about the job, we start talking about how they get into those situations. But what we're missing is when they were 5, when they did something in school, they got sent to the principal's office and ended up getting suspended without needing to. Like the principal was just in a bad mood that day. And we're talking about a 5-year-old. Like, what could a 5-year-old possibly do to get suspended? But that's the root. So now they keep recreating that circumstance over and over again in their adult life, and they can't figure out why it's happening. Because if we just deal with the surface stuff of like, okay, this happens at all my jobs, maybe we can go back a little bit and go, like, what was it like in your house when you were like a teenager? Maybe we can think back as far as like your older childhood years, but you're probably not going to remember that thing when you were 5 because it's unconscious. So if we don't go there, the dark cloud doesn't go away. And you can do all the mindset work you want. It's going to be temporary. It's a band-aid. And that's why I feel horrible saying this, but
Mhm.
mindset work is bullshit. Because what we're doing with mindset work is you're taking a very strong existing neural pathway and you're trying to override it. So the pathway is not going anywhere. What you're doing is you're switching lanes every single time. You're trying to switch lanes, which is fine temporarily, but it's not long term because that neural pathway is old and it's strong and it has a lot of exits and it's like a super highway. And so it's not going anywhere unless you go back to the root and see why it got there in the first place.
So would you say that this is something that like shadow work is best done with like practice with somebody else, or is this something that somebody can kind of do on their own?
So my goal with the book, with my YouTube channel, with my TikTok is to get people doing it on their own because I don't think that anybody needs to rely on anyone else. I think if we were left to our own devices and we didn't have older people, adults, teachers, mentors telling us what to do, what to think, how to act our entire lives, we would have done this naturally. And probably in hundreds of years ago, we were doing this naturally. And it's become something that we've unlearned. So if we can relearn it and start to do it, it's pretty easy. I do shadow work on my own all the time. The idea, though, is just figuring out how to do it. So for the first couple of times, having that guide to walk you through it so you know what to expect is key because then you know exactly what to expect. You know what it feels like. You can trust it versus trying it for the first time on your own and being like, I don't know what I just did. I don't know if this is right. But ultimately, I want everybody doing shadow work all the time on their own at their leisure, whenever they feel like something's triggering them, because we can and we should.
I love that perspective because I think that a lot of things in the wellness and different spaces are like, you need a person to do it. Like, you can't do it without somebody. And like, I love that you're giving us the tools and you want us to like try to do it on our
Honestly,
own.
I think that's just narcissism. And I think we can say that for anybody, because if you need me, then I'm special. But if you don't need me and you can do it yourself, then you're empowered. And that's a hard thing for people in positions of power to let people feel as empowered. We all have the ability to heal ourselves. We don't need anybody else. But what we do need is the knowledge base. We need to understand exactly what we're doing. We need to know how it feels so we can replicate it. So the first couple times to have a guide with you is good. And I think that with anything, I mean, think about going to the gym, right? The first time you step into a gym and you're looking around and you're like, what are these death contraptions? Like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, I don't know what form is. I don't know like the best way to do it. But if you were to work with, say, a physical trainer for like 3 sessions, 4 sessions, and they give you the breakdown, they show you how to use everything, they show you what it feels like in your body when your bicep is working. You don't need them anymore because now you know it and you know what to do. All you have to do is replicate it. So I think the same can be said for just about anything. We all have the ability to do it on our own if we're willing to learn from others and to take that information in and use it and trust ourselves.
So then for somebody that maybe wants to work with somebody, what do you have to like offer for them?
Of course. So for me, I only do group shadow work sessions, and I do that through my program, Create Your Light Academy. And the reason why I do it in groups is because it's so powerful to have people support you through it. So if you're going back to these really heavy moments, this darkness, and you come back and we were just the two of us, we'd process through it for a few minutes. I go, all right, see you next time. And you'd be on your own. And that sucks. And I felt that way with therapy too, where it's like, okay, I'll see you next week. But now you're wrecked for a week. Like you're left with your heart bleeding open. And that's terrible. With shadow work, we always want to kind of tie it off with a bow at the end of the sessions and really feel like we released it. But it's still something you have to process afterwards because you just found out a piece of information that you didn't know about yourself. And that's a shift. It's something that's going to change. So being surrounded by other people who are doing it with you, who are in your corner, having people that you can call at any moment or vent to or just feel supported by is a game changer. But the way that we do it with Create Your Light Academy is we're doing 2 months of shadow work. So every single week, we're doing a different shadow work session. And they're all recorded so you can do them again and again and again and again. And you feel massively different. Everybody that comes through Create Your Light says they never expected how deep it would go and how quickly they would start feeling like a different person. And by the time we hit like week 6, people will start to comment on how you literally look different. Because if we're changing your neurology and we're changing your physiology, we're changing how your DNA is expressed. So you'll start to look different. You will actually have your appearance shift slightly, and people notice it too. So you'll start looking more refreshed. You'll start looking more light. You'll start looking like you don't have this burden that you're carrying around you. And over time, you'll start to feel incredible. And that lasts forever. Because if we're really getting to the root cause and we're getting rid of those old neural pathways, you never slide back. There is no going back after that. There's only going forward. So 5 years later, I still have people who did the first few rounds of Create Your Light Academy reach out to me and be like, I can't believe how I still feel this good. Like even when things that are heavy happen, it just doesn't hit me the way that it would have before. Like it rolls off my shoulders. Like my kids are going through this something that's horrible and I'm okay and I can be their rock and I can hold them through it. So that's why I do it as a group. But my practice, the Wellness Collective that I'm the CEO of, also has practitioners who do one-to-one sessions, especially for those people who want to test the waters and see what it feels like and just understand it on a level where they're going to take it and run with it on their own. So you can sign up with anybody at my company at wellnessphl.com. And it's PHL because it used to be Philly based, but now we're all virtual and we're taking care of people all over the world, which is awesome. We have clients in Australia, we have them in India, we have clients in Norway, we have clients in Australia and Hawaii. It's just so amazing to be able to help people everywhere. So they're always available for one-to-one sessions, either one-offs or working with them for a long time, like I did with my old mentor, Allison. Or of course, the first thing I recommend for anybody is start with my book, because that's going to give you the understanding, the really deep dive into what the hell you're doing to your body, which everyone should know. You should always be an educated consumer when you go into something. Make sure you know exactly what it is and what it's going to feel like so that you understand what it's doing to your insides.
It's amazing that it's virtual now. You're, because like now, yeah, like you're saying, now you can go anywhere in the world. Like the
Literally
impact
anywhere.
you guys are
It's
making is
wild.
incredible.
I can't tell you how often I every single day I'm trying to like calculate time zones. I'd be like a master at it by now, you would think, but I'm not. Where someone's like, hey, like wanted to create your light academy. I'm in Australia. And I'm like, all right, let's work out the time difference. Let's figure it out. And let's get you in here because it's gonna be really impactful. So I just feel lucky to be able to do this work.
So then for the Wellness Collective, you don't only just do the shadow work. There's more there,
Yeah,
right?
we also have therapy because even though I'm not a practicing therapist anymore, I know how impactful therapy is and how important it is for people to have a therapist. Because for me, my thought is shadow work gets to the root cause of your problems. But if we're dealing with the day to day stuff and you just want to get better in the here and now or action plan for the future, that's what you're doing with a therapist. And our therapists are top tier, they're absolutely incredible. And a few of them also work as life coaches. So if you just wanted to be future focused, you could do that there too. And then we also have Reiki certification, again, all virtual. So we can have people in that cert who are all over the world. I have a couple other courses coming out with the women in the Wellness Collective, which I'm always excited to share. And we have one off Reiki sessions too that you can do with our master Reiki practitioner. And then, of course, we have our events, the biggest one being Selfish Philly. That happens every fall in Philadelphia. And hopefully one day we'll have Selfish fill in the blank name of your local city here because that's my goal. I want Selfish Philly to take over. And that's all based on my experience with cancer, that I didn't have the resources that I needed. And I will, if I can help it, never let any other woman feel the way that I did when my doctors didn't have answers for me, because I'm going to make sure that women have the answers ahead of time.
That's beautiful. So then for when you created Selfish Philly, like where did that, so I know you said from kind of inspired from your cancer diagnosis, how did you kind of like put all the pieces together and like
Naivety and delusion. So, like I said, it was like that pamphlet thing, like that blew my mind when they told me to look at the wall of pamphlets. I did. I went over to that wall of pamphlets and they were like, here's what to do when you're anxious. And it was like, take 3 deep breaths. And I was like, this is just not enough. This isn't it. So I left there still depressed. I went through my whole cancer treatment. I finished that. And in April, I went to Disney with my family. And it was the first time, like, that was the thing that I was looking forward to. The whole time that I was going through cancer treatment, I was like, you just have to get to Disney. And it sounds cheesy. It's like, you just have to get to Disney because then you're going to be fine. Like, when you're there, all your surgery is going to be done. You're going to be there with your kids. They're going to be so happy. And you're going to feel like this is over, like you close the chapter. And it was in Disney when we were there and I was spending time like sitting by the pool. I was still recovering from my last surgery. So like my body was going through it. So I spent a lot of time just like sitting by the pool and relaxing and trying to let myself heal. But I was thinking about that experience for me and how I didn't want other people to feel that way. I was trying to think about what that would look like. I already had the Wellness Collective brewing and that was coming. It wasn't officially launched yet, but I knew that was coming. But the impact that we have at the Wellness Collective is good. Like we service a lot of people, but a day like Selfish Philly services hundreds of people in a 24-hour span. So for me, that was always the big goal is how do I bring in all of the resources, the holistic doctors, the Western medicine doctors, the acupuncturists, the Reiki people, the people who are life coaches. How do I bring everybody into one space and have them be resources for the women who live in the area so that they know exactly who to turn to? It's like if someone has, let's just say lupus, like somebody has an autoimmune illness where their body aches all the time. They were talking to Carrie at Halcyon Floats about how this autoimmune illness can be helped with flotation therapy, where you're laying in a flotation chamber for 90 minutes and your entire body is being supported by salt water. So your whole spine is getting stretched out and cerebrospinal fluid is able to move really easily through the body. It's impactful. You might never have heard of that before. Or if you've heard of floating, you've just thought about sensory deprivation and you haven't thought about all the physical benefits that it has, especially for people with autoimmune illnesses. So that's where you learn about it. You talk to them, you get to meet the women who own these businesses because the vast majority of the businesses that we have at Selfish are owned by women. And I try to make sure that as many of them as humanly possible are owned by women who are minorities because their businesses need spotlight. They need to be supported, and we need to make sure that you know who they are. So, with the ability to be able to talk to the women who own these businesses, to hear what they do, to understand directly by talking to the owner about how it's going to help you, and then to go sit in a talk where you get to listen to some of the top experts in the area talk about how to take a handle of your health, or how to handle grief, or what womb health is, and why it should be important to you. And then to be able to go experience some of these things. Like we have VIP rooms where you can just duck in and get some of these services there on the spot. Like you can have a Reiki session, you can get craniosacral massage all on site. It's paradigm shifting. If I would have had a day like that before my cancer surgeries, I would have known how to handle myself the entire time I was going through treatment, all those months. I would have known how to help my body recover during that time. And I would have been able to take care of my mental health, which I couldn't do in the state that I was in. And when you get a diagnosis like that, that's not the time to plan. That's not the time to sit back and go, who are my resources? Because your brain is honestly, it's effed up. Like all you're thinking about is that you're going to die. You're not in a position to be thinking about your care team and what resources you need. So you kind of need to know who they are ahead of time. You need to be preventative about it. So when the moment comes, it's not something you have to think about consciously. It becomes a subconscious behavior. You already know them. You know who your people are, and you don't have to think.
Selfish Philly had to have been like one of the first times that I felt like I was like, oh my God, I'm in a room with people that like love the same stuff as me. It was like a light switch for me. I was like, this is amazing. I met you there. I met so many incredible, inspiring women. So who would you say then Selfish Philly is like perfect for? Like who needs to get a ticket?
And so this is so funny that we're talking about this. I have a marketing team that I meet with every Friday at 10 o'clock. So I'll be seeing them in a little bit. And the marketing team and I last week broke down the people who've shown up to to Selfish Philly every single year. Like, who are they and what do they do? And I put them into a few different buckets. So the ones who I think it's perfect for and the ones who need it the most are the people who don't actually come, which are the ones who were like me before I had cancer, the ones who are burnt out, tired. They don't understand why holistic health is important. And if they come, it's because one of their friends dragged them there against their will. And all they're thinking about is how they have to leave early because there's so much stuff they have to do. But those are the people that are going to benefit the most. And hopefully one day I really get them there en masse. The ones who come every year devoted to it, who understand it, are my spirit junkies, my education lovers, and my wellness advocates. And all three of those buckets are people with a different spin who really understand why this is important and understand that having all these resources in the same room at the same time is key. So you get to have like a crash course in everything wellness, everything spirituality, everything education based, and you don't have to go searching for it over the course of time. It's brought to you. All you have to do is be there to take it in. So if you're someone who fits into any of those buckets, even the burnt out person who maybe is listening to this while they're doing something else because productivity is key, slow down, let yourself rest and get a ticket to Selfish Philly because it's going to be life changing. And this year we actually had the W hotels reach out to us to partner. They understand the mission. I think most people, especially women, have some form of like cancer in their families. They understand the impact that it has. So that story of having this happen to me out of nowhere is one that resonates with a lot of people because they had a mom who passed away, or they had a family member who just suddenly died or was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and nobody saw it coming. So we all know it in our bodies. We feel it. And we understand it really deeply. This is the next step. This is the now what.
I'm definitely gonna be telling like all my friends, I'll be like, you guys have to come because I think I've gotten a lot of different words in their head now that I like talk about this stuff all the time, and I'm like, I don't know, like mindset or like shadow work or like wellness, and like so they hear it, but not necessarily like,
Seeing it.
have gone to like the floats or anything. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna drag them with me.
This year I'm going to have brand ambassadors, so it makes it even easier to get your friends to come. So I'll be on I don't know when this is going to come out, but I'll be unveiling that in the next month. So I'm sure you'll end up being a brand ambassador for me, and it'll make it super fun, and we can just spread the word and get so many more people as much help as humanly possible. And my goal for the conference is to get as many sponsors involved so the tickets can be as cheap as possible because everybody needs this.
And I love the angle that you're coming from. Like, this is what you needed when you had your diagnosis. Because I think, like, Oh, it makes me love the event even more because I'm like, this is what my mom needed
Yeah.
when, she was going through everything because she really gave up because she didn't get answers. So
Yeah.
I
It's
think,
really disheartening. A lot of the people who come to Selfish Philly are older women, and they'll come to me during the day or afterwards. I'm easy to spot because of my red hair. So everybody knows who I am, which makes it really easy. But they'll come to me during the day or afterwards and say things like, "You're so lucky that your generation was born when you guys were, because this, like a day like this, was not an option for us." And it's hard unlearning everything we've learned up until this point and
Mhm.
trying to relearn it now. But I'm glad that we're here, like some iteration of that from every one of them every single year. And it's why I do it.
I got the chills. Oh, I love that. I know we're coming close to our time. Really quick, do you think you could tell us a bit about like the manifestation that you were saying? Because I know some of my
Yeah.
listeners love that.
Of course. So the thing with manifestation is that you can't manifest without shadow work. And that's the part that sucks. Like that's the unhappy part, is everybody just wants to quantum leap into the future. And if you have shadow weighing you down, it essentially is an energetic vibration that we can measure that is heavy. And so if your nervous system is existing in the past, it can't also exist in the future. You have to handle your nervous system first. So the idea is that subconscious feedback loop that we were talking about, the senses that create emotions, that create physical reactions, that create thoughts. It's the same four pieces that you need to manifest. So when you've done your shadow work and you don't have your nervous system stuck in the past anymore, you have the ability to tap into the future. And what you need to do that, which I detail at length in my book, is that you can access the future experiences in a sensory way. Actually use all of your senses when you're picturing what that future is going to look like. Smell it. What does that future place smell like? What does it taste like? What foods are you eating in that future version of your reality? What do you see every day when you wake up in the morning? What does it look like? What do you feel? Like, are you waking up on silk sheets? Like, actually feel them on your skin. Because when you use all those senses, now you can tap into your emotions, because that's going to make you feel certain emotions. One of them should always be gratitude. Let yourself feel deep gratitude for the things that you're sensing. And if you feel that gratitude, it's going to let a bunch of really good feel good chemicals move down your nervous system. Things like norepinephrine, things like serotonin, dopamine. And when that happens, the body is going to be deeply relaxed. And so, as you're envisioning this future, it's not just something you see on a vision board, it's something you literally can taste. And as you do, your whole body is calm. And the thought that comes back up to reinforce this loop, because you've done your shadow work already, is going to reinforce this future reality of, this is mine. This is something that I'm going to have, or it's like 2 seconds away. I'm about to have it. And when you believe it like that, it's easy for it to manifest. If you don't do your shadow work and you try to manifest and use all the secrets people talk about, like identify the emotions, visualize the future, what happens is that loop kicks into gear and your body will still be in fight or flight. And so the thought that comes up when you're in fight or flight is, that's never going to happen for you. You're not worthy of that. Other people are closer to that than you are, and it'll never come to be. That's the secret to manifestation that everybody misses. And when you do your shadow work, you manifest like that. I've worked with so many women in Create Your Light Academy who came in and they couldn't afford the program and they were so poor. Things were so hard. They couldn't figure it out. And they signed up anyway. And they did all the shadow work and they manifest six-figure businesses. They manifest million-dollar homes. They manifest realities they never would have dreamed of, career shifts that just drop into their lap, because when you do your shadow work, it's effortless.
Oh my gosh, that makes me so excited. I'm like, I can't wait to get a shadow work session and everything.
Well, you know where to find us.
Yes,
Wellness
I
PHL to do one-offs, or my next round of Create Your Light Academy is starting in March.
March. Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, let us know any of your offers that maybe you didn't mention already, and if there's any last thing you want to leave the listener with, where to find
Yeah.
you, etc.
Of course. So on social media, you can find me everywhere at IAM, like I am, Danielle Massi. It's the same spelling as on my book. You can also pick up my book on Amazon, Barnes Noble, Target.com, Walmart.com, most crystal shops carrying it, anywhere the books are sold. And the book will be the first step. But if you want to start getting into my world and doing this in a very like dip your toes in slowly kind of way, I have a subscription on my Instagram that you can sign up for. It's $4.99 a month. And we do shadow work meditations, we do prompts, we do Q&As, and I give the people in that everything. So you can start really getting into this for like next to nothing. Because for me, at the end of the day, it's always about helping. I have other programs that I run too, things like Writers Academy, where I teach people how to become bestsellers like I am, because the publishing world is very tight-lipped about how to do it. And I like to be really transparent. I like to help everybody and I don't hold back. So I give you step by step exactly how to get published. I give you a PDF breakdown of what an overview for a book proposal looks like. I give you a plug and play template to put all the information that we work on during the course directly into your book proposal, so you're ready to ship it off and get an agent. And my agent is the same agency that represents Dan Brown, like Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons. So I know how to write a book proposal, and I'm going to teach you how to do it too. And that's it. Besides Selfish Philly, which is coming up this year, September 17th, it's going to be at the W. So we have extremely cheap room rates on gorgeous hotel rooms. The hotel rooms normally are so expensive and they're giving it to us for a steal. So if you're traveling from out of town, it's incredible. And I'll see you at the pool the day before and the day after, sitting in a cabana. We'll hang out and we'll have some mocktails and it's going to be a blast.
And I will put all the websites and handles in the show notes and everything. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, and I don't know how many times if I've said it before, but like you inspire me so much. I look up to you and like so grateful for you to share your story and for you being here today and for you being here and everything. So I can't wait to see, what else you do, and I know I'm excited to start the shadow work stuff.
Yay. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, have a good one.
You too.
Bye.